Okay, so a couple of years ago, my friend Amir was taking a guided tour of a castle, the inside of a castle in Scotland. And while he was on this tour, he thought to himself, wouldn't it be awesome if I could capture this experience while I'm here and then revisit it virtually when I get home? And Amir thought it would be great to be able to capture like a real 3D environment and then have all the time in the world to explore it instead of being stuck on a guided tour. So Amir came back with this big idea. This is him, by the way, having his big idea. We found this photo. When he got back, he told me and a few of our other engineering and design friends about this crazy notion. And we thought it was, one, crazy, but two, it sounded awesome. It sounded like it was something that was just on the edge of what was technically possible. And we decided that we needed to make this happen. And this technology is called 3D indoor mapping. And it's about capturing real spaces in their real 3D format and then putting them into a computer so that those simulations can be visited later and used in cool ways. And at first, the only application that we had in mind for this technology was basically for virtual tourism. It was for going to castles in Scotland or maybe touring a museum on the other side of the world, something like that. But as we showed our evolving prototypes to more and more people, what we discovered is that there are tons of uses that other people thought up that we just weren't imaginative enough to think of in the first place. So forensic analysts told us that it would be cool to be able to capture a crime scene in 3D right after some crime happened so that they could return later to take detailed measurements. And building constructors, contractors, I guess you call them, and architects would love to be able to collaborate as a building is under construction, to be able to scan each floor of the building every day and compare daily results, things like that. We even talked to some geologists. There's a picture here of us in a cave system in Ocala. We got to take our scanning gear up into the earth and do, I guess, one of the first 3D indoor maps using this technology underground. So that was really cool. All right, so I'd like to show you a couple examples of 3D scans and then explain a little more about what it is we're looking at. All right. Is this showing up for everybody? Yes, okay. So what we're looking at here is a 3D scene that I captured with a little device I'll tell you more about in a second. It's commonly available, and some magic software that we came up with. And what we're looking at is some of the guys on the team here, one of them sitting in the audience. We were at a conference getting ready to show some of our early results, and we were sitting at a little waiting area. And I walked around 30 seconds, recorded this little data set. What I'd like to show you is, unlike a typical video or panorama or some kind of capture where the scene is static, we're able to do things like this, where I can come way up high above this 3D capture and view the scene from a perspective that the camera never had. Or I can get really, really, really in close like this, and we can start to see the 3D data, like I'm looking here kind of at the table in Gannon's shoes. And I can even do really weird stuff like this, where I'm going to experience the world as Carl saw it that day. So I'm going to move in, and we're going to rotate the view so that we are inside of Carl's head, looking out into the world. Sorry, I love this. Which is a really weird thing to do, but now that's what Carl sees when he's using his laptop. So that's kind of cool. All right, so that looks neat. But the real point of this technology is to be able to do stuff more like this. Everyone see that all right? All right, so I've just teleported sort of into a Victorian mansion that's in the duck pond. And it was undergoing renovation at the time. And I'm standing in the dining room in a 3D view. And what we can see here is that there's some exposed framing in the walls and a couple of ladders. And as I rotate around, you can see there's a sort of a living room that's being totally renovated off that way. And if I turn back, we'll be able to see that there's sort of a kitchen behind us. Now, a lot of us have seen virtual real estate tours where you can kind of like pop from one place to another inside a building. But this is something very different. As you can see, this is a real 3D world. I'm basically playing a video game here. So I'm able to move to the kitchen, sort of step around. I can run back through that little dining room where we were, go into this little living area. I can jump around. I don't know. It's kind of cool. What else can I? Okay, so here are some stairs. So I mean, this works just like a real 3D environment, and it looks rough because it's early days. But previously, you were only able to capture this kind of data with like a $100,000 laser scanner, whereas I was able to take a $200 device, walk around for a couple of minutes, and anybody can capture stuff like this. Okay, so that's a little bit about what the technology looks like right now, but I'd like to show you just a tiny bit about how it works, starting with the sensor. And the devices you see up on the screen are all technically called depth cameras. And they all cost about $100 to $200. This one here is slightly more expensive, but these are very accessible devices. You might recognize on the screen the Microsoft Kinect, which is in 30 million living rooms around the world. The crazy thing about these devices is they weren't originally intended for this purpose. These are toys. These are intended to be video game controllers that you put on top of your TV and you dance around in front of it to play video games. And their magic power is that they can detect the distance to the player's body. So they can see where your hand is, and if your hand is moving rapidly toward the device, it knows that you're throwing a punch, or if your foot is moving toward it, you're throwing a kick, and so on. And the cool thing about these devices is that they are extremely low cost. The downside to them is that they are kind of extremely hard to work with, let's say, for this application. Okay, so what do? Well, this is what they see. Like a regular camera, they see a normal color photograph. That's old hat. But they also see what's called a depth image, which you see here on the right. And in this depth image, the distance to the surface is encoded in grayscale, where the things that are darker are closer to the camera, and the things that are far away are lighter. It's sort of like fog receding into the distance. So that's pretty cool. And here is how they work. There are basically two ways. One type of camera is called a structured light camera. It's very simple in concept. It projects a pattern of structured light, a regular grid, out into the room. And then based on how that grid deforms when it hits the surface, it can tell what the shape of the room is. So in this case, it would be looking at, kind of a weird example, it would be looking at something like a billowing flag or sheet or something like that. The other type of device is called a time-of-flight camera. These are becoming more common, also very low-cost devices, getting so cheap that very soon they're going to start to appear in our smartphones and in our tablets. A time-of-flight camera works by firing a very quick and very invisible IR spectrum light pulse out into the room. That light goes out into the room, it bounces off of surfaces, and comes back to the camera. Light travels really fast, so this is incredible. It times how long it takes that pulse to return, and from that it can tell how far away the surface is. So these devices are awesome, but they're very inexpensive, and they are really limited in what they can see. They are not 3D cameras. They're regular 2D cameras, but they have an additional, what they call a half dimension, which is depth. And technically the name of these cameras is 2.5D. But in early 2011, some researchers began experimenting with these cameras in a new way. Instead of putting them on top of TVs and dancing around in front of them, researchers started to pick the devices up and move them around objects. And by doing so, they were able to record very small experimental 3D scenes, like maybe a vase sitting on a table or a person sitting in a chair. And that's really cool. And those early examples were very promising. But what we saw was a more general solution because we wanted to be able to capture large spaces. And that's what we solved. So we created an algorithm that can take all these little independent 2.5D snapshots of the world, and then over time stitch them into a full 3D environment. So by way of analogy, this would be sort of like, for a human, imagine someone took this, I don't know how many pieces, 3,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and threw it out on a table in front of you. If you had this algorithm in your head, you would be able to take one glance at that puzzle lying out in disarray on the floor, and then close your eyes and think about it for just a couple minutes. And when you opened your eyes, you'd be able to reach out and perfectly assemble that puzzle on the first try with no errors every time. And that's exactly what this algorithm does. But instead of using 2D cardboard cutout pieces, it uses, here's another puzzle in disarray, it uses thousands and thousands of little 2.5D snapshots of the world. And by categorizing them by a size and appearance, it's able to predict the correct configuration that those should come together in to create a 3D environment. And it looks cool. And that's the technology. And the great thing about it, just like being able to shake up a puzzle, this algorithm doesn't care what order that data is presented in, which means that it's not just that you can record an environment. It means that like 10 people could collaboratively record this environment all at the same time. Then we put all the data in one box, hand it to the algorithm, it looks at it and solves it in the same way every time. That means 10 or 100 people could scan a very large environment. And that's when stuff starts to get really exciting. Okay, so that's sort of what the technology looks like and a little about the sensors and algorithm and so on. But how will this technology progress from where it is in this very, very early state to where it will start to transform the future? Well, we believe that this technology will soon become so accessible. It'll be in smartphones and tablets. It'll be so fun and easy that pretty soon 3D indoor mapping will become commonplace. It'll be as common to pull out your smartphone and record a cool environment that you're in as it is today to pull out your phone and take a photo of lunch and put it on Twitter or whatever. So how might you use this technology in the not too distant future? Well, imagine you want to do something like redecorate your house. You'll go to your living room, you'll pull out your tablet that's got one of these new depth sensors in it, you'll wave it around the living room, and you'll download a 3D model, an accurate 3D model of your living room to your iPad or your tablet. You'll select your existing furniture, you'll delete it, and you'll drag in, some new fancy furniture from like an IKEA catalog or something like that. Or, wherever you shop. And that's a cool application. But what would be even cooler is imagine going to a museum and you see a piece that you find really fascinating, some artwork, some little corner, some exhibit. You'll pull out your tablet, you'll scan that little exhibit, and you'll upload it to the internet to tell your friend about, and you'll invite them to virtually visit it with you. Say, like, look what I saw today, isn't this cool? And everyone visiting a museum will individually record all of the scenes and objects and exhibits that interest them the most. As more and more people begin to do that, what we will start to capture is this collaboratively collected global database of this museum. And that's awesome, because now maybe a child on the other side of the world can visit this museum virtually and take a virtual tour, even if they couldn't afford to travel there and visit it in person. And at this level of collaborative scanning, think something like Wikipedia and YouTube. It's like sort of the Wikipedia of places. There will be so many places available in this global database that we're all contributing to that it'll really start to transform the future. Imagine being able to walk up to a building you've never been inside of before, wearing a pair of smart glasses like the Google Glass. And just before you enter the building, your glasses download a 3D indoor map of that environment so that when you go in, you're presented with a heads-up display, an augmented reality view of where you're headed with arrows and all of this sort of cool stuff. That would be awesome. And while you're there in the building today, your glasses, you can choose to let your glasses upload the latest 3D data that you're perceiving back to that global database to benefit people that come after you. So if you were in a mall or something like that, maybe your glasses would say like, oh, the pretzel line is not too long right now. Or you might note that there's a big crowd here today, something like that. That would be really transformative for people. But now imagine that same pair of glasses on a person who can't see. Well, with a wearable computer and auditory feedback and a 3D indoor map, a person who's visually impaired might be able to receive auditory cues that lets them navigate that environment. And they might hear, you've entered the building, the place you're looking for is 200 feet ahead of you down the hallway. Watch out for the chairs in front of you. A user just told us there are some chairs blocking the entrance, something like that. And now this is out into the crazy sci-fi distant future, but all of these 3D indoor maps that we start to collect of our homes and our offices and our public spaces, the places that are most important to us, they'll be able to be utilized by helpful robots. And finally, we can start to have these cool, awesome robots that do stuff for us that we don't want to do, that sci-fi has been promising us for so long. So if you have a Roomba vacuum cleaner at home, this is what it does in your living room when you're not there. And it's a time-lapse photo. Now you can see this robot right now just drives around totally randomly because it can't see, it has no idea where it is. It bumps into things, it turns, and it continues. If that Roomba had a 3D indoor map of your living room, for example, maybe the one that you uploaded when you were shopping for furniture the other day, this thing would be able to perceive exactly where it was, and it could do a much, much, much better job of keeping your house clean. And then into the way distant future, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we can finally get that robot butler that, that we've been promised for so long? That would be really awesome. And even better, maybe assistive robots could help people inside their homes, doing the things that I take for granted every day, like being able to reach into cabinets or answer the door. That would just be awesome. So that's where the technology is headed. Okay. Sorry, you're really excited about this stuff. But clearly, these are all just big, crazy dreams for the future. And from the very early examples that I showed you, we're definitely not there yet. But our mission is to continue developing this technology to get it into the hands of as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. Because in the end, the real applications for something as important as 3D indoor mapping will only be realized when millions of people have had a chance to dream those applications up. So that's it. Thank you.